recording. There we go. It might ask you if you consent to being recorded. I don't know if that thing's automatic or not.
Yeah, I just hit the little thing that said got it.
Okay, cool. All right, so we can go ahead and get started. So just some basic questions at first. So what were some of your earliest experiences with hallucinogens? And then sort of a follow-up to that is, did it start off as something that was more recreational for you? Or did it always something spiritual? Or did it transition to that?
Ooh, these are gonna get deep. Okay.
Mhm.
So so a long time ago, I'd say maybe 3 years, I got into psychedelics because I had an interest in jailbreaking my brain. At first, I was interested in nootropics. You watch Limitless and you wonder what the wonder drug is and how do you get smarter, and so you start looking into smart drugs. And I didn't feel much from nootropics, and I'm the kind of person that likes to feel the substances that they take because that lets me know that they're working.
Yeah.
So then, you look into things like psychedelics, and people say that they're mind altering and mind bending, and you can go to other dimensions, and they have all these claims. And the only way you can find out if those claims have validity is to actually do them yourself. So I talked to some people who had done them and asked what they were about. And describing psychedelics, the experience to somebody is like trying to tell a blind man, what a kaleidoscope looks like. It's just It's impossible.
It's impossible, yeah.
So I acquire some mushrooms and I acquire some LSD, and I decided that it would be smart to just baby step my way through each one of them. And there's, from what I understand, a 2-week tolerance for your brain to reset. So a Saturday, I would take 1 gram of mushrooms, experience that. And then 2 weeks later, that following, Saturday, I would take 1 tab of acid. And then 2 weeks later, 2 grams of mushrooms, 2 weeks later, 2 tabs of acid. And I kind of climbed my way up. And it went from just wanting to expand my brain and make it more efficient into starting to become spiritual experiences. I didn't jump into this looking for anything spiritual. But when you go deep enough with that stuff, you find yourself in places that you can't explain.
Yeah.
And that's where I started to ask myself some very serious questions. And there was a night in October of 2019, I took a very reckless dose of mushrooms. There's a strain called Penis Envy. You're probably familiar with the potency. I took about 13 grams of that and just blew my world apart. And it was not in a good way. And so I reached out to an ayahuasca center in Peru, Blue Morpho, and I asked them, what happens when you take a medicine and it you misuse it and it hurts you? And the shamans told me, well, that's something called soul loss, and you need to come here and we need to help you, because I felt so fragmented. It was like damn near psychosis. So I did. I went to Peru, and that was my Aya experience. There was 5 nights of drinking that shit, and you want to talk about a spiritual experience? Like, I can't unsee the things I saw.
Yeah.
So that's my origins of psychedelics.
Yeah, and I remember us talking about Blue Morpho when I messaged you back in April, and me reading up on them. So this is just a follow-up question, just because I kind of know about this stuff at least a little bit. Was when you took all those mushrooms, was the point of it, was it you trying to do a heroic dose? Because I know that that's sort of the terminology when you take a lot. Was that the goal, or was it just you were just pushing the limit constantly?
A little bit of both. I knew what the heroic dose. I knew what it was. It's Terence McKenna says it's 5 grams.
Of course.
Yeah. 5 grams.
I know you went way higher than that. I understood that as well. Yeah.
But when I was starting out, the 1 gram, 2 gram, 3 tab, whatever.
Yeah.
I creeped up on the heroic dose level, and then I had my quote unquote heroic experiences. And then after that, when you read online, you understand that people say cliche things like, well, your journey doesn't even start until 6 grams, 7 grams, 8 grams. And then you hear about people taking 30 grams. And so it's like, okay, how far can I take this?
Yeah.
And then I had a handful of bad experiences before my ultimate bad experience. When you start getting into like the 9 tab, 10 tab, 11 gram territories, you're not in control at all anymore. You don't even know you're in the room. So you could completely melt and wake up and be in a very bad situation. So I had a couple incidents like that where it scared me, and so bad that I was like, I need to stop. Like something bad's going to happen if I continue down this road.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, I would scare myself, and then a couple weeks would go by and I would think like, no, I can do it. and I would put myself right back in another shitty situation and scare myself so bad again until I finally beat myself up.
How much of that, honestly, and this is off script now, but it's just me thinking about you. How much of that do you think is based on like, because as much as you are like a psychedelic influencer, you're a fitness influencer. Most of your content is fitness with your CrossFit. Do you think part of that is like that sort of push for the PR almost? Like always trying to push that? Like, I know it's a weird connection. I don't mean that in sort of a joking way, but like, do you think it's that sort of chase?
No, you're actually not far off at all. So you're touching a piece of my character.
I don't mean it in a bad way. That's whatsoever.
No. It's easy to see. So, and it sounds egotistical even saying it, but I do have an ego. We all have an ego.
Of course, everyone does.
We all battle with our ego, and part of my ego is I chase trophies. Like I set goals, I set numbers, and then I don't know how to do anything else but try to go after those. And it's funny that you bring up fitness because, you know, what's the oldest mantra, you know, besides the golden rule that everyone says, you know, there's 3 contingent parts. There's the mind, body, and spirit, right? So the mind is academics and learning and knowledge. And then the body is, well, the temple that you have until you die. And then the spirit, which to me now is psychedelics and trying to get in touch with the divine and figure out the universe. So it's like those 3 components are all very important.
Yeah.
So, you know, CrossFit and fitness and psychedelics and trying to make myself smarter, listening to podcasts, watching documentaries, just go in every direction.
Yeah. It's all part about bringing that upper limit. No,
Yeah.
100%. I totally understand what you're saying. I need to clearly close some of these tabs because it keeps opening the wrong document. There it is. Okay, so that's question 1 and 2. And also, I just want to say again, you're my first interview. You're the first person I will talk to. This is fucking awesome. It just is. Like I'm nerding out entirely of just doing this in general. So thank you already.
This is mutual, man. I'm excited because this kind of feels like a podcast. Like this is kind of dope.
I mean, it is, in a way it is. I mean, it's just the end result is a little bit different because I'm trying to write an ethnography. But I mean, no, I mean, it's all about bringing people together and trying to understand, especially when it's something that like is about activism. Because at the end of the day, like I've used hallucinogens before. I'm not super into it, like in terms of taking them, but I love the concept of them. I grew up in a friend group of people who I was always the trip sitter. I was always taking care of guys. I've helped people through ego death. Like I kind of get from the outside more than anything else. And like, it's all about awareness and just being active because it's like, this stuff's illegal for no fucking reason. Like we need to get better ways of decriminalizing. So at the end of the day, it's always about that sort of push.
Absolutely.
So the next question is kind of background to you before hallucinogens really became part of your life. And it's sort of about like how you got to this point. So like some of the things I'm trying to figure out is like, I'll just read the question straight up. How do you relate hallucinogen usage to your sense of spiritual self? And what has shaped that understanding? And what in like your personal experiences relates to that? So like some starter questions is like, for you, and I don't know these things. And again, religion can sometimes be touchy, but like, you know, growing up, did you have a specific religious upbringing that sort of shapes how you understand the world when you're on hallucinogens, or do you think it's very separate?
I think because, you know, like the Temple of the Light, they're like Christian.
Yeah, it's Christian syncretic, yeah.
Right. So then they take ayahuasca and then they see Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what they're looking for. No, I was raised and baptized Catholic, and stopped going to church when I was young because I told my mom it just felt silly. It made no sense to me.
Mhm.
And I I became a staunch, well, not staunch. I was temporarily atheist.
Mhm.
And then as I think when you pick either theistic or atheistic viewpoints, I think it's lazy. I don't know. It's hard to explain. So I ended up an agnostic
Yeah.
because nobody could give me anything except for compelling arguments, but no proof.
Mhm.
You can't prove to me that there's a God, but you can't disprove it either. There's just compelling argument. That's philosophy 101. So when I started taking these substances in high dose, I started to get a sense of like, these things are real, obviously, I'm experiencing them, but I was trying to figure out why. And what I don't know if you've noticed on my Instagram, but I post a lot of lengthy writings.
Yeah.
And some of those writings, I try to basically tear into how spirituality is not something ethereal, but it's something tangible. We just don't understand it.
Mhm.
So, like, for example, your brain builds a world with its default mode network, right? That's how you understand the world.
Yeah.
And when you take psychedelics, it disrupts that default mode network. So I give this analogy to people. When you're driving down the street and you see all these blades of grass, the leaves in the trees, the lines on the road, you don't count how many there are because that information is not pertinent to you. It doesn't help you as an organism navigate through this world. But when you take psychedelics, you disrupt that default mode network, and now all of a sudden, all the information from the universe is simultaneously coming into your organic computer.
Mhm.
And that's what you would interpret as like hallucinations or synesthesia. Like, it's so much information to process, and you've never experienced it before, that it makes no sense.
Mhm.
But that doesn't negate the fact that it's there. So spirituality, I would say, is like, when people go looking for God, well, God's everywhere. You're only experiencing a sliver or a slice of the pie all the time
Yeah.
because you're stuck in this rigid default mode network. But the psychedelics disrupt that, and then you have access to it.
Mhm.
That's what divine is. You're removing the filter between you and the universe.
Mhm. So
far, that's my theory.
Yeah. And I feel like especially with spirituality in general, it's always that sort of that discovery because I mean, when you subscribe to your conventional religion, you have a scripture, you have authority figures who are telling you, but when it comes to spirituality involved with it, even if it doesn't involve hallucinogens, but for when it does, I mean, your teacher is the plants, and that's kind of you'll have shamans, of course, in the West. They're few and far between, granted, but it is about that sort of personal understanding and that development almost. So no, I mean, I think you're just as right as anyone else might be at this point.
Yeah.
Um, so so then the next question after that is like, how often do you have like a spiritual experience with hallucinogens? Is it always like continuous, or is it something where sometimes you might be what we might call just recreational, and then sometimes it might be very spiritual for you?
I've had a lot more recreational experiences than I have spiritual.
Mhm.
Typically, the spiritual stuff doesn't really happen until you cross that threshold of like ego death, or what I call like a synthetic suicide,
Mhm.
which is you take enough to convince yourself that you're actually dying and crossing over. Your brain thinks you're dying.
Yeah.
Um, because if you don't, I think if you don't go through that panic, if you still understand that you're in the same room that you started in, that's not very spiritual.
Yeah.
But when you think you're dying and you think you have died, and then all of a sudden you can't make sense of your world anymore, and you start receiving messages and you start seeing, symbols and Jesus or whatever mythological creatures, whatever pops into your head, and you start seeing that stuff that seems to be like coming from the divine,
Yeah.
that's when you come into like the spiritual experience.
Yeah.
Origins of life,
Yeah.
all that stuff. But no, when you just see the walls moving and the colors look different, that's recreational.
Yeah, no, of course. But so do you go back and forth between those now? Like, are there some days where it's like you just take a little bit and then it's just a recreational sort of activity, and then other days you have more and then it's spiritual? Like for you personally, like it recently, obviously you've had a longer development period. So it's like, oh well, before it was this, but like now for you at least.
Okay, so now in the 2 years behind me, well, 2.5 now, a lot of that was just experimentation.
Mhm,
It was just continuously upping my doses to see what was going to happen, basically.
mhm,
And then I would say I had, out of dosing myself maybe 200 times,
mhm.
I think would have, I'd say four of those were majorly debatably spiritual. And then I went to Peru, and that was by far the most spiritual.
Mhm.
Um, and now I honestly don't dabble that much because there's another quote by Dennis McKenna. You know, he said, once you get the message, you can hang up the phone. And
Wow, yeah.
I kind of took that to heart. You know, I had dosed myself enough at different amounts, and I started to just get the same old lesson. And
Yeah.
I figured out the problems in myself to work on. I got those things cleared up. And now what I'm doing is just seeking out the things that are going to get deeper, the ayahuasca with shamans, the ibogaine with shamans, the peyote, huachuma, the bigger stuff in ceremonial settings. Like I don't sit here and dose myself to high hell anymore.
Yeah.
So
This is still so fucking cool. Um, it just is like I'm loving it. No, that's I love that. I love that cut actually. Once you get the message, you hang up the phone. I That's so fucking good. Okay. Stop nerding out. So another thing, and I guess now this is like kind of gets into that because now if you're focusing more on ceremony, I think in the past you were probably much more individual practicing, like you were dosing yourself individually, but now it seems like it's more so group things. I've noticed on in some of the skits you do, like you'll make skits about like I remember one is like it's just you, and then you're like when you accidentally give your friend too much like mushrooms or whatever, and then your friend
yeah.
just like what. I think you had like the psychedelic clown filter on, like um
Yeah.
so has that sort of been a transition for you as well, going from like sort of individual experiences into social experiences more so, or is it still something that kind of goes back and forth?
Well, so social in way, so like
It's social in terms of a group setting, like you are taking it and there are other people taking it with you in a shared space. Not necessarily you have to know them. Like if you went to an Aya ceremony with Blue Morpho, I'm assuming other people were in the room. That is what I mean by a social.
so with other people, usually if I'm dosing myself for fun or to do a little bit of actual work,
Mhm.
most of the time I'm going to do it by myself.
Okay.
If it's a social setting where I'm giving it to someone else, it would be because I'm trying to introduce the substance to somebody who I think it would benefit them.
Yeah.
Um, but mainly because I'm seeking out these very powerful medicines that I need them to be dosed appropriately and I need to be under supervision. I have no choice but to seek out a shaman,
Mhm.
and preferably a shaman that is an actual shaman who knows what they're doing, not just Tim in Wyoming who read a book on ayahuasca.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that just subsequently forces me to take part in group setting psychedelic experiences.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, of course. I see exactly what you're saying. So it does kind of go back and forth, but at the same time, it goes back and forth not because you necessarily want it to, but that requirement almost.
mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, if it traditionally, you know, if you're going to do Aya, you do it in a group setting, and
yeah,
you do it. It just is what it is.
yeah,
You know, when I went to Utah for a peyote ceremony, and traditionally, you know, you sit in a teepee with a bunch of people, and you all work out your shit together, and that's what we did.
yeah, yeah. You went. What was that over the summer? That was fairly recent, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was 3 months ago, 4 months ago.
Jesus, I've been following you for so long. I can't keep it all together. Um, okay, no, awesome. Um, so this one I feel like we touched on a little bit already. So if we want to move on past it, it is up to you. But question 6 is, what insights do you think hallucinogens have given you that you don't think you would have found otherwise, or maybe just not as easily? And that could be wherever, if it's personal, social, spiritual, whatever.
So I think that is two answers to that.
Mhm,
One of them mainly is personal development.
mhm,
I mean, honest disclosure, like I used to be a piece of shit. I was very non-empathetic. I used people, I manipulated them. I
mhm,
was not a great guy. And I ruined my past relationships because of that.
mhm,
And a couple of my heavy psychedelic sessions turned all that against me. And
mhm,
those plants made me feel the pain that I caused other people and told me that that was not okay.
mhm.
And you're going to continue to feel and have a terrible life if you don't get your shit straight. That's basically what the plants told me.
Yeah.
So personal development, they changed me and my worldview on the universe. So I have I call it a fear. Our morbidity scares the shit out of me. Dying scares the shit out of me because I don't know what's going to happen
Uh-huh.
and you can't stop it. You have
Yeah.
no power. You, we're powerless to that one. And psychedelics, because they disrupt the wires in your brain to such a powerful degree at heavy dose, they can make you actually feel like you are dying. When that is your main fear and you have to confront that, and then you are convinced of it, you have gone past fear, past terror, into capital D dread,
Yeah.
where you can't process anything but to be afraid. And I've only been there a couple times, and it is overwhelming. But when you come out the other side of that, you have this different appreciation and insight for what life is.
Yeah.
So I would say I took that away.
Yeah. Fair enough. Um, this next question is fairly based in sort of my old research project with Temple of Light and looking at the discrimination they sort of face not only in Brazil but also here in the States and almost everywhere they go. But like in terms of, because at least for you especially, I don't know what you're like in your or your private public life, like out when you're out with friends or whatever. But obviously on social media, you're very open about your usage and your spiritual experiences. Um, So for question 7, it's how do people treat your usage, especially when you discuss it in something that's usually so for you, it's spiritual now, when for most people they just think of it as getting high, recreation, whatever else. Do people generally are they very interested in it? Are they uneasy? What usually happens?
I think people kind of keep a distance.
Mhm,
So, you get a couple. If there's 100 people, I'd say maybe 5 of them ask me questions about it here and there.
mhm,
And then maybe one of them asks me deeper questions.
mhm,
But for the most part, because I am public with it, I think what I have on my side is I actually have my life together, though.
mhm.
Most people that do a bunch of any kind of substance just don't have their shit together.
Yeah.
So people they conflate those two.
Mhm,
But because I have my health and nutrition, my fitness, my love for learning, my going to school, I have 2 jobs, and I just also happen to advocate for psychedelics because I believe that they can promote, mental
mhm,
wellness.
mhm.
I think because I can present it in that kind of way, people aren't so put off by it, but they do still see it as taboo because it has been demonized and propagandized, and people see
Yeah,
it as this
100%.
weird
100%.
thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a mind altering substance, and there's old stigmas like if you take acid, you're going to jump out of a 10-story window. That's not true.
Mhm.
So people they're aware of it. They
Yeah.
sometimes look about it, but they don't dig too deep into it.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest fears, and like that's why I really found with like when I worked with Temple of Light is like it's always that fear of stigmatization of disenfranchisement, and that, I guess it's another part of the question. Like, has there ever been a time where you have really been like discriminated against for those beliefs, like in terms of jobs, relationship? No, you've been lucky enough not to.
No, no one's openly expressed it. I'm sure maybe a few people have thought it, but no one's.
Yeah, of course. But like in terms of actual action, they can't do shit. That's the sort of idea. Yeah, no, of course. Um, I think that's probably the best fucking thing that could happen, honestly. Because it would be way worse if obviously something did happen, like you couldn't get a job because well you use this or whatever the fuck else. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that was always sort of the fear of because of that discrimination that they've faced for so many years. So that's good. Um, this question is like the exact same as the last one. What the fuck is this? This is the exact question. I'm skipping that question. um, so this is kind of the reversal of that because the last question was kind of like, how do people perceive you? But it's like, how do you perceive yourself in a way? Like my wording here is like, do you see yourself as your average Joe / Jane who just does things a little differently? Or do you find that you find like a real distance between yourself and someone who hasn't engaged in these substances?
What's funny is literally the piece that I wrote yesterday is called "Living on an Island," and I put that up on Instagram. And that
Where's my phone? Where is it? I threw my phone because it was ringing. I'm gonna look at this while you talk about it. No, continue.
Yeah, it's literally talking about how the metaphor is to live on an island, and what that means is I had this discussion with a friend of mine, and he made the analogy, and it's when you feel so different from everyone else, and I don't mean this in like a emotional emo, oh, I'm different, look at me kind of way. It's just that I notice that other people do things different. They live different.
Yeah.
I don't subscribe to a lot of the habits and just customs that everyone else does. I just don't seem to care about the same things that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I view them or myself, I mean, I see myself as different because I don't partake in a lot of the things that everyone else seems to regularly do.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I don't know, small things. I don't care to go out. I don't do birthdays. I don't own a lot of things. Every waking day, I'm trying to figure out what happens when I die.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I obsess over it as a quote unquote philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's all we do.
Yeah.
We fucking look at the stars and we just ask why all day long. And we're kind of weird for it.
But how much of that do you think is you, and how much of you think is the Aya or the psilocybin, or
it's mostly me because before I even got into psychedelics, my friend told me, because he's a philosophy major, and we would have conversations at work, and he was like, "You are just doing philosophy." And I was like, "What is that?" He was like, "It's all these questions you have and the things we talk about. That's philosophy. You've been doing it your whole life. You just didn't know what it was called."
Yeah.
So I've always had a wonder about big questions. Psychedelics just kind of gave me another perspective on all the questions that I had.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. I'm trying to figure out how to word this question for you, because this is kind of like online engagement. I guess maybe I should skip this and go on to the ones I made specifically for you, because this question is basically like, how does the group of people you engage with online act as a community? But I feel like it's kind of hard to say when it's like you're just someone who's bringing content to others. I mean, if you have comments on it, absolutely go ahead. But
I think the only interaction I've had is a few of my pieces that I've written on Instagram. I have a couple friends, like maybe 3 out of 600 that will actually read those. And they'll just say it's relatable or it's interesting, and maybe they'll ask a question. And then on TikTok, it's a bunch of people I don't know that have become my followers, and sometimes they'll chime in on one of, say, like the ayahuasca videos, like the very first one that you mentioned about me talking to the shaman about it being scary.
Yeah.
That one actually went, I don't know how many the number is for viral, but it's like 100 and something thousand views.
No,
like,
I would definitely consider that viral. That is a viral TikTok.
And then there's like a bunch of, so it got a bunch of comments, and the comment section blew up, and it's a bunch of people who have either done Aya or had their own spiritual experience, and they're like chiming in with their conversations.
Mhm.
So I guess that response from community.
No, 100%. I would absolutely consider that. So like, and I guess that sort of gets into the next questions as well. But I guess so. What do you get out of that? Is kind of my question. Like from those people on the, like, let's say the TikTok specifically of them being like, oh, I had my own experiences. Like, what does that tell you as much as you're telling them? I guess.
Okay. So, do you play video games?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the term NPC?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's kind of how me and a friend of mine have viewed a lot of the people in this world.
Yeah.
They're just NPCs. They walk around, they run their programs.
Yeah.
And also, if you're familiar with Plato's allegory, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so you have people that just live downstairs and all they know is their shadow.
Yeah. Oh yes, the man in the cave, of course.
For me, what I get out of this is if I can help expedite the process of bringing psychedelics to mainstream. You know, I know we've got Aubrey Marcus, we've got MAPS, you know, we've got these bigger organizations that are much larger than me.
Yeah.
But if I can assist in getting a regular person, Joe Schmo, who doesn't know anything past their football team, to take a bag of mushrooms and all of a sudden start asking bigger questions, I am all for that.
Yeah.
I would love to wake everyone up so that this world can change a little bit, because right now it's just a giant shit show of people fighting over stupid shit.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I see the world as very archaic, and I feel like if we introduce psychedelics the way that we have cannabis, I think this world can change, honestly, wholeheartedly. You can't have a spiritual experience and then walk away normal again. You just can't.
Yeah.
So if we got 8 billion people, and they're not for everybody, they're not.
Yeah. 100%.
But let's the 5% that they are for, you get those people to wake up, they're going to influence a lot of other
Everyone
people to wake
else. Exactly.
up. Yep.
Yeah.
I would love to do that.
And that's why, and that's one of the things that like this project has sort of always kind of been thinking about. I talk about as if this project is a person. But it's like one thing that I've talked about my advisors with and other people with, because I'm always the person who, like, people hear my research project because I'm very involved in like our student union. I know all the master students from my year, the year above me, the year below me. And it's always like, oh, what do you research? What's your research project? I was like, oh, I study spiritual use of hallucinogens. And you're like, oh my God, that's fucking dope. Like, what? But something we've always thought about, at least sort of, again, because I am really an outsider in this, I'm aware of it on a surface level, and I've obviously done tons of readings and I've researched other groups, but at the end of the day, I'm still someone who is outside this group. And so many times, like hallucinogen usage is seen as an individual practice. It's something that single individuals go, at least in the West, in the global North. But do you think that like when you have that engagement, that viral engagement from people, does it feel like, rather than like this shared experience you all have, does it give you a connection to the people that are strangers?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
So in the quote unquote spiritual community, I guess I have to claim them as my tribe because we all have gone through that like initiation or whatever.
Yeah.
But a lot of those people drive me fucking crazy. They really do. They're so quote unquote woke and about their crystals and whatever rituals they've come up with, and they preach them, and 9 out of 10 times they sound like they're full of shit. And it drives me crazy. To some of them, I would say there's like a kinship. You can kind of tell. There's the ones who have legitimately had a spiritual experience because it is so dead serious to them. And then there's the people that walk around that just talk about chakras all day. And it's like, you obviously haven't had your ass kicked by God yet.
Yeah.
It's like the fake gangster, the guy that goes around looking like he's a gangster.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy, no one's ever pulled his card yet.
Yeah.
Same in spiritual world.
Yeah.
If you're going around acting like that, it's because you haven't had the Godsmack.
Yeah.
It just is, I don't know.
Mhm.
So you can tell the real ones, they're quiet about it. It's a serious thing to them.
Yeah. No, seriously. I think that's one of the best takes I've heard so far tonight of that sort of idea of that, because in especially like in our classes we're doing right now, because I'm still taking class while doing the research project. One of the things we talked about the other day was boundaries. All last week was all about boundaries. It's the idea of like how you separate yourself from other people, kind of culturally, or however else you might differentiate an in group from an out group. And I think it's kind of interesting that, in a sense, you're creating another division where it's like, okay, all these people use hallucinogens and they're spiritual about it. Well, hold on, but some of these people don't seem like they know what the fuck they're talking about. And then there's the real people who really know. It's an interesting way to sort of engage with that. But I think I mean, I believe it, because absolutely, I've met plenty of crazy people. I'm like, there's no way you actually believe this shit. Like, there's no way.
Well, okay, so there are people who are not very articulate.
Yeah, of course.
They have the brain that they've been given. I was blessed with a good vocabulary. And this someone who's not articulate might have a very powerful spiritual experience, but he just can't convey it very well, so he sounds like a crazy person.
Yeah.
But like, to give you another analogy, like shamans, you have your pretend shaman. They wear the big capes and they have a scepter and they chant and they want you to make you feel like they're a big, powerful shaman.
Yeah.
The real shamans are just wearing a t-shirt and pants.
Yes, I can attest. I've been to an Aya ceremony in Ecuador. Yeah. Literally, they're chilling. That's all it is.
They're regular dudes.
Yeah.
They're not trying to put on the dog and pony show.
Yeah. No, that's another really good take, actually. Let me. Because I am lucky enough to have met real yachucks, as they've called themselves in Ecuador. So I can see, I have that image in my head of like, yeah, you're right. They really are just chilling. They don't really care that much. Where was the last question? Where did it go?
How I see myself?
No, not. I haven't asked it yet. I think I like kind of restructured one in my head and now I've lost it. No, I got it. So the last question is really like, and this is something I add at the end just because I'm curious. Like, and obviously I know why, like the overarching reason why you're posting this. You want to make that change the world. You want to have at least one, and I'm the same way. With a research project like this, my goal is like, if I can help one person, like, be like, oh wow, hallucinogens aren't that bad, or oh wow, hallucinogens like should be decriminalized. Like, that's sort of like, at the end of the day, I'm fucking ecstatic if I can get one person to open their eyes a little bit. But so in terms of like the first time you engaged with it and like made it like a public post, like why? Because was it always that overarching idea, or were you just like, this would be funny, fuck it?
No, I think the first time I went public with it, I think I actually started going public with it, my interest with it, before I even knew what I was getting into.
Mm-hmm.
I think back when I very first started and I just put my toe in the water, mm-hmm. and I thought I had a bunch of insight, I'd started sharing the very cliche posts, rehashed memes on Facebook.
Yeah.
The third eye, the eye of Ra, the pineal gland, the society's waking up, you're in the matrix, all that crap that you get into like the first time you do mushrooms.
Yeah.
I think I started sharing that stuff. And then as time went on, I don't know, you progress into things that are a little more insightful.
Yeah.
And then you have a deeper experience that compels you to make a more prolific post. And over the course of 3 years, like now I'm trying to write my own little mini dissertations of trying to give someone logic on what the universe actually is. Like, it's just evolved over time.
Yeah. So was it really just at the beginning when you were reposting those, bullshit, like not bullshit, but you know what I mean. It's like the Facebook memes. Was it really just like, oh, that's kind of interesting? I'll share that with my family or like my friends or whoever's following me.
I think my aim was to get people to think. So like I like the thought of like what Socrates does. You know, like he goes around and he just asks people questions that he knows is gonna fuck him up
Yeah,
because he wants them to think. You know, you walk up to a Christian and you say, well, can God make a stone so heavy he can't lift it? And then it just makes them start thinking. And it's like, I don't care what answer you give me, but I want you to think about
yeah. You want to see the hamster wheel start turning a little bit. It's like, oh fuck, okay, yeah.
it. Yeah, and there's a million of those parlor tricks.
Mhm.
So on Facebook or online, you know, I post something hoping that somebody would read it and just stop for a second and just be like, huh, I never thought about that.
Mhm.
Like,
Now it's sort of transitioned into that sort of overarching like being active or being an activist, I suppose, activism, being engaged, trying to open people up to not even just the fact that like, oh, these are things that are happening and you should think about them, but also just like you should be accepting of these practices. You should understand what's really going on, that sort of thing.
kind of, yeah, it's just some of these things that I feel like I stumble into just blow my mind so much that I'm just like, how can this not be super important to somebody else? And like, I understand, we all have different brains. Some people only care about architecture. Some people only care about, uh, I don't know, saving dolphins.
Mhm.
Not everyone cares about philosophy and God,
Mhm.
but I will have this thought or an experience, and I'm like, man, if I can articulate this and make it public, someone's gonna see that, and they're just gonna be blown away by it.
Yeah.
Not blown away by like my work, but blown away by like the idea of like, oh my
Yeah.
god, if it's true, the implications are just
Yeah.
enormous, and that means something. Rarely does that actually happen, because honestly, people don't care.
Yeah.
But I always just feel so excited or compelled to share to try and
No,
get somebody's brain turning.
of course. You do not have to talk to me about doing stuff that no one gives a shit. I'm going to be writing papers that are going to collect dust. A dissertation is literally just collecting dust in a library somewhere, and that's what it is. So you don't have to explain it to me. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's also about that sort of personal catharsis of knowing that you created something. It's
Yeah.
always nice. So I,
One of
I I totally understand the idea of like no one really gives a shit, but I'm going to continue to do this because.
the That's funny that you say that because the very first piece that I ever seriously wrote was called Catharsis.
Full circle. It's always full circle. Um,
Right?
yeah, I
Universe,
mean, those are the questions. That's it.
cool deal.
That
I
was
like
great.
that.
Oh my fucking god, that was amazing. And plus, it was just an hour, which that was my biggest worry, honestly, because I messaged you. I was like, oh, I hope it'll be between 1 and 2 hours. Like, I think I was like, I swear to God, if this becomes like a 3 hour thing, I'm gonna feel so fucking bad because it's hard for me to gauge that. But no, I mean, there is one more question, but like I'd already discussed this with you before, and like it's something that I follow you enough that I kind of know, and you post enough. But like obviously, any materials that you come across that you love in terms of mentorship or films or whatever, um, send those my way. Message them to me. Um,
Okay.
but I religiously watch, or sorry, spiritually watch your your content every single day when I have a chance. Just like boom, boom, boom. So I get a lot of it, and I keep track of a lot of it. But nonetheless, if you have anything that comes up that you're not gonna post, but you think it would be interesting, or just good for the project for help my understanding, because I'm just as much as a newbie trying to understand this world. That's kind of the point. Send them my way. But no, this was great. Like I seriously, this was really fucking fantastic.
Awesome. I'm glad.
Um, in terms of from here, actually, let me stop the recording now because it doesn't matter.